Hello everyone. Today we are going to continue looking at the Nimzo Indian with Queen B3, the Spielman variation. So the following sequence of moves, how this game started, may be a surprise for you, but then I will show why it is relevant for us. So this game went d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, obviously nothing to do with the Nimzo Indian, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. So it was actually a Ragozin. And here white played a relatively rare move, queen b3. And black took, queen takes c3, knight e4, queen c2, and short castle. So they reached this position after move 7. So why it is relevant for us? So if we go back to the first move, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, so we reach the Nimzo Indian, play queen b3, and actually it's a relatively common move, especially online, but surprisingly even over the board for black to take on c3 in this position. And this is just a huge success for white. It's basically giving up a tempo for free. So why is that? So bishop takes on c3. Okay, first just let's see the transposition. So queen takes on c3, black plays d5, which is completely normal move. White goes knight f3. Black can go, for example, knight e4, why not? And then after queen c2 short castle, we reach the position which was also reached in this game. So this is how the transposition works here. What is the problem with this bishop c3? Because okay, the bishop is under attack. Black takes with the check and then can make another move, so seemingly not losing time. But once again, the problem is that if white would play queen c2, the main or one of the main lines in the Nimzo, then I don't know any player with black who would take on c3 in this position for no reason. Again, black has millions of moves here, short castle, d5, c5, b6, even a move or knight c6, many other moves, but definitely, I mean, just for example, absolute main line, short castle, white plays a3, bishop takes, queen takes. So you can see the point of this queen b3 now, that queen b3 does the job of challenging the bishop and protecting the knight at the same time. And here white has to make an additional move a3 to challenge this bishop and gain the bishop pair. So basically, compared to these lines, when we reach such position, it's like black is voluntarily taking on c3 and losing a valuable tempo. So therefore, whenever this variation is happening with bishop takes c3, we should be already satisfied with the opening, since basically we are winning a move to the main lines. So that's a huge success. All right, so now let's return to this position, what was played in the game. Here white played e3. It's completely normal. Black plays b6, bishop to d3, bishop b7. So just a completely normal position where white has the bishop pair and black doesn't really have any particularly dangerous play for it. So short castle. And here black played f5 right away. So basically trying to go for a stone wall type of play with attack on the king side. So what could have been maybe an improvement for black, although it's quite debatable whether it's a big deal, but to start with knight d7, because the knight from d7 covers e5 square. So after black goes f5, jumping with the knight to e5 can always be traded. So we cannot use that weak square anymore. So one example for this line is like, okay, white just plays with b4 obviously, so we have some space advantage on the queen side, so we want to push there maybe with a4 at some moment, c5, gaining space and closing this bishop on b7 is an idea. So black can go f5, we can go c5. Of course, now black has to take time out to stop c6. a4, for example, rook f6, bishop b2. So just normal moves. Black is playing rook h6. And one move which is like, I wouldn't say it's necessary in such position because it's not likely anyway that we are getting mated or anything close to it, because this bishop is not gonna mate us, probably the same for this knight. And black is very badly missing a dark squared bishop, which could put pressure on h2. But okay, what is black's main idea? Push g4, g5, and then maybe the queen comes to h4. So move g3 is normally an excellent defensive move. It frees the knight from, covering h4, and then it can jump to e1 or d2, and then white can play f3, and pretty much there is no attack for black at all. So that's just one move which is good to know, that after this, like, for example, if black tries to go for something like this, white can just play knight e1, and yeah, I mean f3 is gonna be a good defensive move. So yeah, that would have been the thing with knight d7. So f5 was played in the game, and here it's very useful to play knight e5. So occupying this weak square on e5, and then f3, we can kick the only active piece from black from e4. So it's just, instead what I showed previously, that okay, we play g3 and then go backwards with the knight, we can just go to e5 in this situation and completely solve this issue of protecting against future queen h4 ideas. So black played knight d7 in the game. I just looked at this dc4 because probably I will rather return to it later, but that's an alternative. So knight d7, knight takes on d7. Again, this is almost always what happens, that okay, we don't want, okay, for example, b3, knight e5, d5, we don't really want this structure, because then we cannot use the weakness of the e5 square, and also if the bishop goes to the long diagonal, it would have big problems to use it effectively. So taking is more logical. Queen takes on d7. And I believe this is the most interesting moment of the game. Here white played f3. And instead of that, probably it would have been better to play b3. So what is the difference here? Is that white is ready to face d takes on c4 with b takes on c4. And keep the nice control over the center, with options later of pushing c5 or d5, and the long diagonal could be also quite nice for the bishop on c1. So here, okay, I looked at different moves. So for example, if dc4, similarly to the game, then just bc, and if rook f6, then f3, we can easily kick back the knight, knight d6, okay, for example, bishop b2, and we have c5 option in the air, d5 option in the air, and in general, we just have a lot of pawns in the center, and black has no real counterplay in this case. So another move black can try is rook f6, but again, easy again to kick back the knight even before anything would start, and then knight d6, c5, knight f7, for example, and bishop b2. So it's clear that we are not getting attacked on the king side because black simply has no pieces for that, and we can just push forward where we have space advantage. Again, very clear advantage for white. So if black goes g5, which looks like at least some type of an attacking move, we can again kick back the knight before anything would start. And after knight f6, there is c5. With similar play what I showed before, and it's important that if black would like to trade, both recaptures are good, but I like dc5 because after that the bishop can be really strong in the long diagonal. So with b3, this d takes c4 option is kind of eliminated. I would say that's the main point of this move. So that's why, after knight e5, I looked at, okay, what if black tries to do it one move earlier, but the problem is that after dc4, bishop c4 is coming with the tempo on the e6 pawn. So there is no knight d7. Black has to take some defensive move to protect e6, but it is this one tempo, like even if knight d7 comes and we trade, it's one tempo for black, but things are even worse. White can, for example, play b3, and in case of knight d7, there is bishop a3. So decoying the queen, and after queen here, we have an intermediate check on e6 and winning a lot of material. So yeah, this is not really good to take so early, and of course it looks quite illogical as well. So knight d7 takes f3 was the game. Here it's maybe also worth mentioning that, okay, c5 in general is not a bad move to play, but in this particular case, I mean, black didn't start to do anything on the king side yet. So normally it's better to wait for a move like g5 to push c5, because in such case bc, dc, there is a move like a5 with the idea of bishop a6 and trading that bad bishop, and black's king side is safe. And just imagine a pawn on g5 in such situation, then white can just go b3 and use this weakness of the long diagonal quite well. So that's also just some little nuance here which can be important. So white played f3, and black played a great move here, dc4. So the point is that this c5 option from white is eliminated, so we cannot gain a lot of space on the queen side anymore, and the bishop is also open now in the long diagonal, which could be important for a g5 g4 play. And surprisingly, after this, the position is not so easy. So therefore, playing b3 just to avoid this option is quite useful. So bishop takes c4 was played, and now black had to be careful because it may look like f6 square is more comfortable for the knight, but queen f5, and the pin here is just means that white is winning the pawn. So bishop takes c4, knight d6 had to be played. Now, of course, we have to move the bishop. We cannot give up the bishop pair. So white went bishop e2. Black went rook f6, which is okay. And bishop d2. And yeah, basically, I believe the game was decided at this move. Because black simply went for a wrong setup. Without this g pawn, there is no counterplay. So only with pieces you cannot create anything against such a safe king. You need to use this g pawn to weaken the long diagonal, to create some targets for the rooks on the g file, and so on. So g5 should have been played, and once again it looks quite nice for white, but it's not like we are getting mated again. It's not the case at all. But it's also not so easy to get progress on the queen side, because okay, let's say first we can make a move like bishop e1, so the bishop can defend all the time on the king side. Black plays rook f8, for example, rook c1 and rook f7, for example. And it's, okay, black is protecting well on c7. And what is exactly other target for white? It's not clear. So bishop, okay, we have bishop pair, that's great, but how we use it is not completely clear. So once again, just imagine this situation with the pawns. It would be a perfect situation to push c5, gain space, and then start moving with the other pawns. So it's not happening there, and the position is far from clear, in my opinion. Couldn't really find any plan which is very convincing, and okay, black also has some ideas. Instead, on bishop d2, black played rook g6, and that's a serious mistake, I believe, because it stops the pawn, which, it's kind of, once again, it's not like mating us, but it creates enough, hint of counterplay, which prevents white from pushing easily on the queen side. So that would be super important, and basically after this move, the game was just a one-way traffic, basically without almost mistakes from either side, but there was nothing much to do for black, because now bishop e1, that was a nice move. So bishop is coming to g3, where it will be both protecting the king and also attack on the queen side. So that's a perfect square. Black played rook f8. Now rook c1, attacking on c7. Rook f7, bishop g3, queen e7. Black is trying to bring the queen to the king side, but there is nothing going on there. Bishop d3 was played. Maybe sometimes e4 can be considered, but in general, just having an x-ray on the rook is not bad. So black went rook h6, bishop e5, queen h4. Even now, there is absolutely nothing. I couldn't tell you what is black's next move here, but offering the queen of trade with the tempo is quite nice. Like basically, if black would have agreed to this trade, I mean, the game is probably over on the spot, because rook fc2 is coming in the next move, and protecting on c7 is an impossible task. Of course, the knight can do it from e8, but then the bishop is also attacking c7, so it would be just over very quickly. But again, the game was not much longer anyways. So now queen g3, rook g6, and queen f4. Queen is basically doing the same thing as the bishop, very well protecting the king side and also putting pressure on the c7 pawn and the d6 knight, obviously. So now black protected with rook d7, rook f2, so the new piece is coming to c2 and attack on c7. And yeah, there is nothing here basically for black. So what black could try on the king side, but there is nothing more. I mean, there is only one little thing here that, okay, for example, if black passes with h6, we shouldn't blunder. That okay, we are pinned here on the g file, but on h6, there is king f1, there is king h1. The threats are over, rook c2 is coming, and white is collecting material. So black tried knight f7, but of course it shouldn't work. White just took the pawn, knight g5. Now there are some threats on f3 with the knight, on h3 with the knight, but once the king steps out of the g file, the threats are over and black has nothing to do. Decided to sacrifice the bishop. G takes f3 with knight h3, I would say is quite interesting and maybe working, because not only the queen is hanging, but also rook g1 with rook c1 is coming. But obviously having two bishops for the rook is good enough for white, and basically the queen trade happened. So we have two bishops versus the rook, and I mean the rest was just extremely easy. I will show you the game, but really nothing happened here. Why just open the position a little bit further for the bishops and the rook. Even the g5 was not available for the rook to create something, but of course, yeah, it's not possible to create anything in such position. So rook e8, bishop b4, king d7, ef, and black resigned the game because this pawn is promoting. So yeah, I would like once more to say that this was an actually interesting thing, that this dc4 can be an idea, especially after f5. So playing with b3 and keeping this option of c5 is quite interesting and important. And if you are getting attacked, if you remember for this move g3, which again is not exactly necessary in this position, but you know, this idea of removing the knight, because yeah, and if you would remove it right away, then you can get something like queen h4, and you know, things are far from clear. Like h3, maybe knight g5, some attacking ideas, or g5, g4, so it's more tricky. But if the queen cannot come here, then things are much safer. And yeah, in general, even with a different move order, but whenever you get this bishop c3, you should be very happy. You just win a tempo to normal Nimzo Indian lines. So thanks a lot for watching, and see you soon in another video.